Hello, and welcome to another video from 3.5 Archive. Today we're going to be doing another D&D 3.5 Prestige class review, and we're going to be looking at the Avenging Executioner Prestige class from the Complete Scoundrel sourcebook. Avenging Executioners are characters who have been wronged in their past in some way or another, and as a result they choose to take a very vicious and bloody revenge on those who wronged them. And the Avenging Executioner is an interesting prestige class. The example character given is a halfling that was taken in off the streets as a servant for a noble family, but was badly abused and mistreated, and then tossed back out on the street when they were tired of his services or dissatisfied with them. And then, because of his mistreatment, he went on to begin killing off the city's nobles as vengeance for how he was treated. And not just the family that took him in, it is implied, but also others in the city as well. So this is definitely a sort of a morally ambivalent prestige class, and as a result you need to be of non-good alignment in order to take levels in it. But this could definitely make for a sympathetic villain, an unsympathetic villain. It could also make for a sympathetic player character or an unsympathetic player character. So there's a lot of role-playing potential for this prestige class. You do need to have been tragically wronged in some manner. Let's take a look at the requirements here. So you need to be of non-good alignment, as I said. You need to have been tragically wronged in some manner. This is a role-playing based one, and this can be something that is dredged up from your character's past, or something that took place in the campaign. And the Dungeon Master should probably be pretty flexible in what constitutes this, because it's pretty subjective. Anything that would cause your character to choose to go on this path of vengeance. And then you're going to need a base attack bonus of +5, and you're going to need 4 ranks in Hide, 4 ranks in Move Silently, and 6 ranks in Intimidate. So you can come into this as a fighter if you're a human or have a good intelligence score, and you're able to dedicate those cross-class skill ranks to Hide and Move Silently. It's an unconventional choice, and I would say this is a moderately restrictive, even strongly restrictive prestige class for a fighter, although you're not doing a whole lot with your skill ranks anyway. And you're going to need that base attack bonus of +5, which will be no problem for a fighter. Personally, I would recommend playing a rogue. You'll have no issue with the Hide and Move Silently ranks, as well as the Intimidate. And while you have to wait till level 7, this prestige class does give you Sudden Strike, which works kind of like Sneak Attack, and will effectively be the same as Sneak Attack. Another potential option would be to have some levels in Fighter, and then some levels in Rogue, or even Ninja if you wanted to. Ninja doesn't get Intimidate as a class skill, but you could multi-class with Fighter and then take care of these skill ranks that way, no problem. But again, Rogue is probably the best way to get into it. It does take a little bit longer, but it does help you take the most advantage of the Prestige class's features. So what do you get for being an Avenging Executioner? Well, you're going to get a D8 hit die, you're going to get 3/4 base attack bonus, good reflex and will save, and 6+ intelligence modifier skill points per level. And this is a pretty odd set of stats, but it works fairly well. You're not going to have the best base attack, so if you're having trouble hitting, then maybe coming into this as fighter is a good idea. But if you're a weapon finesse rogue, and you can even do this as a 2-weapon fighting rogue, which is a pretty typical build, and while that doesn't work very well with Sudden Strike because it doesn't work with flanking, you still can play it, as we'll see. Your Sudden Strike actually is going to be possibly a little more akin to Sneak Attack. And the other nice thing about this prestige class is that if you come into it as a 7th level rogue, and you do all 5 levels of Avenging Executioner and finish as a 12th level character, you're actually going to have 1 more die of Sneak Attack damage than a 12th level rogue would, if you count Sudden Strike as Sneak Attack. And yeah, you could do this just by multi-classing into Ninja or something like that, but this prestige class I think gives you more interesting features. And of course, you could multi-class, Rogue and Ninja if you wanted to as well. Maybe get the Ghost Step to be able to turn invisible, and that would fit in very well with the Avenging Executioner, and its very much focus on attacking from the shadows. So, what kind of features do you get for being an Avenging Executioner? Well, at level 1, you're going to get Sudden Strike plus 1d6. This is basically Sneak Attack, except that it doesn't work while you're flanking. You're also going to get Bloody Blade. So whenever you deal Sudden Strike damage, note that this is not for Sneak Attack damage, only for Sudden Strike damage, and has to be with a melee weapon. The target of the Sudden Strike and all opponents within 30 feet of you can see the target are shaken for a number of rounds equal to your Avenging Executioner level. They can do a will save of DC 10 plus your Avenging Executioner level plus your Charisma modifier to negate the effect. And then creatures who hit dice exceed your character level are not affected. This is a mind-affecting fear ability. So basing this off of your class level, especially a class that's going to max out at 5 levels, plus your Charisma modifier, means that odds are if you're playing a typical rogue, even if you sink your second best score into this after Dexterity, you're going to be getting a DC 17. If you really love this ability, you could slap Ability Focus on it and get a DC 19 will save to avoid being shaken. This really isn't very good, unfortunately. And the fact that it doesn't work on creatures who hit dice exceed your character level really kind of sinks it. If you're fighting enemies of your level, then odds are their hit dice are going to be equal to your own or greater, just by the nature of how monsters have to be in order to meet their challenge rating. So, again, this is where this prestige class kind of comes in as something more like that for a villain. You know, a high-level character against lower-level characters, they'll be more likely to be shaken by this if it's an enemy NPC. So it works well for that, but I tend to look at these prestige classes primarily as being 4-player characters, even if they are clearly intended to be NPC prestige classes. So, the Bloody Blade feature, unfortunately, is not very good. It is a potential option to do some kind of fear stacking, and it's a fairly easy way to do it, as you leap out of the shadows and hit them, and then maybe you could even just have another class, or maybe Zentrum Fighter or something like that, or one of the other prestige classes we've covered that has ways to make enemies shaken and fear stack that way, cause them to become frightened, and now you've got some crowd control going on, and that would be very cool. By itself, it's a pretty mediocre feature, unfortunately, and it really shows what they intended this prestige class to be. At level 2, you're going to get Rapid Intimidation. This lets you demoralize an opponent as a move action instead of a standard action. And if you have the Favored Enemy class feature, I don't know why you'd be coming into this as a Ranger, but maybe you are. Rangers don't get Intimidate as a class skill, so it'd be a pretty slow path for them. You can add your Favored Enemy bonus to Intimidate checks made to demoralize foes of the chosen type. So that's a nice feature. It's a little bit of a buff, and it does provide some incentive maybe to come into this as a Ranger Rogue or Ranger Ninja. But odds are you're not going to do that, and the reward just really isn't there. Being able to demoralize an opponent as a move action is nice. It means it doesn't take up your whole turn. This means that you could move in, sneak in, maybe with, if you were a ninja, with the Ghost Step invisibly, do a sudden strike on somebody, possibly get some of your enemies shaken, and then the next round, while you're still fighting in melee, you could give up doing a full attack to try to demoralize them into being frightened with fear stacking. If this were to work, then it would be at least a decent idea, but you need to make sure you have a very good Intimidate skill, and also that your enemies have a very bad will save. This is kind of a shaky sort of setup here, just sort of a shaky build here. It could work, but it would have to be in the right campaign with the right types of opponents. If you're running around in the city, and it's often I would confuse this prestige class as being part of Cityscape rather than Complete Scoundrel, and the two books do have a lot of overlap, but if you're in a city campaign fighting a lot of lower level human NPCs or humanoid NPCs, then this will be pretty good. But as is in a lot of D&D campaigns, if you're delving through dungeons, this feature really isn't going to help you out, and it's stacking upon an already weak feature in the Bloody Blade. At 3rd level, you get Sudden Strike plus 2d6 and nothing else. That's alright. That's more damage output. At the very least, you're continuing to get your Sudden Strike, so this prestige class isn't a total wash by any means. But the features so far for what it actually aims to do are a little bit shaky. At level 4, you're going to get Dread Blade. This lets you exploit the terror you inspire to further brutalize your target. And so this means that shaken, frightened, and panic creatures, you treat them as flat-footed for the purpose of your Sudden Strike damage. So this just means that you're dealing a Sudden Strike. This doesn't mean they're actually flat-footed for you, which is kind of a shame. It would be nice if you actually could just ignore their dexterity by exploiting their fear even more so. Help your accuracy a little bit, especially since you only have a 3/4 base attack. But being able to deal out your Sudden Strike is still nice. It's one thing to note that if you were just playing a regular rogue and flanking like usual, then you wouldn't need this feature because you could just be flanking with an ally and dealing your Sudden Strike damage. But for a character that is maybe preying on lower level NPCs, this actually works out fine, as you're intended to be operating alone. You're not going to have an ally to flank with you. And that's probably why the Sudden Strike is here in place of Sneak Attack, like a lot of Prestige classes. Most D&D characters are going to be in a party. So while this is good, again, for a high-level NPC against a lower-level party as an antagonist, this feature is less good for a player character, as it's just patching up a weakness that this Prestige class has in having Sudden Strike instead of Sneak Attack. That said, it is really cool. I think it's the coolest feature of the Prestige class. But it's really not that amazing. That said, it does let you power out your Sudden Strike damage by yourself, which can be helpful sometimes. And again, if you're fighting like lower level NPCs or lower level monsters that you just need to kind of clear out in a larger fight, this can be a good way of dealing with them. And then finally at level 5 you get Bloody Murder. If you deal enough damage with a melee attack to drop a creature below 0 hit points, then anyone within 30 feet of you who can see it become frightened for 1 round. Again, they make a will save with the same DC as Bloody Blade. They'll lessen the effect of Shaken, but that is still an automatic Shaken effect. Creatures who hit dice exceed your character level are not affected, and this is another mind-affecting fear ability. So, interestingly, if you manage to jump into melee and combine Bloody Blade and Bloody Murder and just kill somebody, then it looks like you might cause people to automatically become frightened if they fail the Bloody Blade will save, because of that, they will become shaken from both Bloody Murder and Bloody Blade. So as far as I know, this would cause the frightened condition. But again, from the way this structure, it makes it a little bit unsure just because of the way that Bloody Blade is written, and then Bloody Murder, has that lessened effect of shaken, as well as having a frightened for 1 round effect automatically. So that's a little bit odd. It depends how your Dungeon Master wants to rule this, but it could be a pretty good feature. Heroes of Horror does seem to support this, and so it looks like if you are able to kill somebody in melee, then you do have a pretty good chance, as long as you're doing Sudden Strike damage, to potentially almost automatically force a fear effect on nearby opponents. So that's pretty solid, but overall this Prestige class is unfortunately pretty weak. Automatically right off the bat, anything that is based on fear or causing fear, again, if it's a mind-affecting fear ability, you're going to have a lot of creatures that are just outright immune to mind-affecting abilities, immune to fear, or just have good will saves. And the will save DC that's given here isn't very good. It's based off of your charisma, which is going to be a secondary ability. And while that does make sense for Intimidate, for a class that's based around killing opponents in a very bloody and vicious way in order to terrify nearby foes, they could have perhaps based it off of Dexterity or something like that. That would be a bit unconventional, and 3.5 is often a little bit averse to doing things like that, but this is a rare case where it would actually make a lot of sense. And again, a lot of the features, you'd almost be better off just taking more rogue levels. If you are a rogue that does a lot of actual sneak attack, as in not flanking, but actually just shooting from the shadows or attacking from the shadows, then Sudden Strike is okay, but usually you're going to be better off with just base sneak attack. And even though you do get a d6 ahead in your total, Sudden Strike dice or sneak attack dice put together, it's really not worth it for the limitations that Sudden Strike has. The requirements to get into this Prestige class are light enough that it supports a variety of types of characters. So you could come into this as a fighter, but you're not going to have as good of a stealth skill, so it's going to be harder for you to get that initial Sudden Strike that you're going to need. You could come in as a fighter ninja and have Ghost Step to help you get that, but that's a limited number of uses per day, and that requires a good wisdom alongside a good charisma. And so, unfortunately, this Prestige class is weak in terms of the DC of the abilities that it has. It's weak in terms of just the basic concept of its abilities, and it's weak because it only works on creatures whose hit dice are less than or equal to your character level, which is going to rule out a whole lot of monsters that you fight in a lot of cases. So this Prestige class is good for, again, a high-level antagonist that lower-level player characters run into. And it would be, again, it's a good villain, but it's not very good for a player character in most cases. In a city campaign, or maybe in a solo campaign, if you could somehow make that work, then the Avenging Executioner could be pretty solid. But in most D&D parties, it's going to be hard to make this Prestige class work. It is a cool concept. attacking foes from the shadows and causing nearby enemies to become frightened, but you're probably better off going with the Ghost-Faced Killer prestige class from the Complete Adventure if you really want that. How could we improve the Avenging Executioner? Well, for one thing, you could change the will save DC for Bloody Blade and Bloody Murder to be based off of the half of your total character level instead of your class level, because as that caps out at 5 for the Avenging Executioner's levels, it would otherwise just continue to escalate indefinitely and help you keep up with your character level. I mean, if you get to epic levels and you're still functioning off of an ability negated by a DC 19 will save, then there's just no hope. And while a character like this would struggle at high levels anyway, it'd be especially bad if their Bloody Blade feature no longer improved at all. Unless, of course, you want to just keep increasing your charisma, which you have other ability scores you need to increase as well. Secondly, removing the negation for creatures that have a higher hit die than your character level. That should be taken right out. And I actually would be more than willing to, if I was redesigning this prestige class, to base the will save off of your dexterity modifier rather than your charisma modifier. And again, this is a little bit odd, but it does feed into the prestige class's kind of surgical and gruesome nature that you see from the both from the art that's supplied for the prestige class, as well as the fact that it really looks like it's something that's based more on the, savage and sadistic art of the kill that this character is unleashing, and it just helps the prestige class be a lot more viable in general, as it's already going for a somewhat substandard build type, I guess, but really it would help the prestige class out a lot. It really doesn't have enough going for it to justify taking levels in it as a player character in most cases. Rapid Intimidation also, it might be a good idea to change its benefit from reducing it to a move action to making it a swift action. That might be a little bit too much, but again, if you want to make this fear stacking thing work, you really do need to, first of all, come to terms with the fact that it's not going to work on a lot of monsters outright. Second of all, it's negated by a will save, and third of all, you are giving up a few other abilities in order to get into this prestige class. So while making all of these changes might not be necessary, making at least 2 out of the three would be a good idea, because otherwise it just isn't going to work as is. So overall, the Avenging Executioner is going to get 5 stars for concept, but only 2 stars for execution. It's a really cool idea, and it's really fleshed out, and the example character given is pretty solid, but unfortunately, mechanically, it just falls flat as a player-to-character option. As an NPC option, it gets 3.5 stars, arguably 4 stars if you use it as a high-level NPC against a lower-level party. You could probably use a maxed-out Avenging Executioner against a level 4 or level 5 party for a truly terrifying experience. Maybe wait for them to be level 6 or 7 before you expect them to defeat him. And while that might seem like it's violating the encounter rules, a rogue as a solo encounter for a party of D&D characters isn't going to work out that well, because once he's out in the open, it's going to be pretty much game over for him if he gets mobbed and attacked by a whole party or falls victim to some wizard spells. And that's probably the best use for this prestige class. It's, again, not a very good option for a player character, but it is a cool concept, and with some improvements you could make it viable for a player character, and it could work as is in the right type of campaign. But for your typical D&D campaign where you're not exactly sure what you're going to run into, and a lot of characters, or a lot of your opponents rather, are going to be immune to this entire suite of abilities, then you're going to want to make sure that when you can use them, that they're going to be very effective. So that'll be about it for this D&D 3.5 Prestige Class review. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, and so on. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time here on 3.5 Archive.